Welcome to today's Explainer. I want you to just completely clear your mind of everything you think you know about the night sky. Seriously, today we're opening up a highly classified forensic audit of the moon's true nature. We're going to look strictly at the data, the empirical telemetry, and the actual physics that have been quietly compiled by intelligence syndicates and aerospace engineers over the last 50 years. According to these sources, this isn't just some wild myth. It's a mathematical breakdown of a literal cosmic mystery. Let's get into it.
So, it all starts with this crazy documented historical anomaly. Why on earth did the moon ring like a bell in 1969? It's a question that completely defied every single expectation of mainstream astrophysics at the time. You know, when humanity first touched down on the lunar surface, the scientific establishment was absolutely certain they were landing on a solid, natural, homogeneous rock. But the instruments they left behind, they recorded a thermodynamic and acoustic response that shattered that assumption completely.
Which brings us to part 1, the Apollo Seismic Anomaly.
Okay, let's anchor ourselves in the sheer tension of the Cold War space race. Picture this. It's November 20th, 1969. The Apollo 12 crew intentionally jettisons their lunar module ascent stage, crashing it right into the moon's surface. It hit with the kinetic energy of roughly 1,000 pounds of TNT. NASA seismologists were expecting, a short, dull thud. But that's not at all what the newly installed Passive Seismic Experiment Network recorded. Then, a few months later, in April 1970, Apollo 13 crashes a massive 14,000-kilogram SIVB third stage into the moon. The acoustic reaction this time was so alarming that by July of that same year, elite scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences stepped in to publish a highly controversial paper explaining what was actually going on.
And that brings us to the staggering number 3. After that Apollo 13 impact, the moon's reverberations didn't just give off a heavy localized thud. The moon continuously rang for over 3 hours. 3 hours! And the seismic waves didn't just stay on the surface either. They traveled down to a depth of 25 miles. In planetary physics, a prolonged, oscillating reverberation like that heavily challenged standard models of solid terrestrial bodies. It just didn't make sense.
This acoustic response forced a very serious reevaluation among the world's top astrophysicists. I really want you to let the gravity of this statement from a mainstream scientist sink in. Dr. Gordon McDonnell, a senior NASA scientist, stated on the record, "It would seem that the moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere." Let that sit for a second. Based on raw telemetry, the data literally suggested an empty interior. Let's move on to part 2, the Soviet spaceship hypothesis.
In July 1970, 2 highly cleared elite scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, Mikhail Vosin and Alexander Sherbakov, published a heavily suppressed paper. The title sounds like straight-up science fiction, but it was completely rooted in their analysis of the mathematics. It was called "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" Looking at the ringing anomalies, they deduced that the moon is not a natural gravitationally captured piece of space debris. No, they concluded it is an artificial, hollow, heavily armored command node, a spacecraft.
Now, part 3, the mathematical proofs.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the seismic quality factor, or Q factor, which basically measures the dampening of seismic waves. Think of our Earth as a solid, magma-cored planet, right? It has a low Q factor, hovering around 100. If you hit it, the vibrations are instantly absorbed and deadened by that dense liquid core. But the moon's Q factor, it was measured at over 3,000. According to the Soviet paper, this drastic difference points to the total absence of a dense, homogeneous core. They argued that the acoustic energy didn't absorb. Instead, it just bounced endlessly around a hollow metallic interior hull.
Another super important data point from the sources is the inertia anomaly. In geophysics, the moment of inertia for a completely solid, homogeneous sphere is mathematically dictated to be exactly 0.4. But the moon's moment of inertia? That's measured at exactly 0.3929. The theorists point out that this lower number strongly suggests it is not solid. It points mathematically to a hollow sphere containing massive, localized internal structures that are actually pulling the center of mass in completely unnatural ways. And then the sources highlight this kinematic paradox, centered entirely on the number 400. Check this out. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, but it sits exactly 400 times closer to Earth. That's what creates mathematically perfect solar eclipses. Add to that its tidal locking, which forever hides its dark side from us. And the theorists argue, well, this isn't a coincidence, it's precision orbital parking.
Moving to Part 4, the Lunar Armor Paradox.
Back in 1994, the Department of Defense Clementine satellite executed a deep spectrum analysis of the lunar surface. They were specifically looking at hyperdense gravity anomalies called mascons. And guess what? The exact recipe of the moon's crust includes heavy, totally unnatural concentrations of ilmenite, zirconium, and yttrium. These are refractory metals. They possess extreme resistance to heat, corrosion, and kinetic impact. According to the Soviet theory, this isn't just space dirt. It's an engineered, impact-resistant titanium armor plating.
And honestly, that armor perfectly explains the crater depth paradox. We can observe these massive lunar craters spanning up to 150 miles across. Now, according to natural physics, a meteor strike large enough to create a 150-mile wide hole should gouge out a crater dozens of miles deep. Yet, unexplainably, these massive craters are uniformly shallow. They bottom out at only 2 to 3 miles deep. The Vicent-Shcherbakov conclusion suggests that the meteorites are hitting a hyperdense, impenetrable artificial metallic hole hidden just beneath a 2.5-mile layer of accumulated space dust. Essentially, they're hitting a giant shield.
Finally, Part 5, the Archonic broadcast grid.
If the moon is an armored hollow command node, the source documents offer a deeply unsettling motive for why it was parked in our orbit to begin with. They refer to a concept known as the Gnostic indictment. According to this framework, the moon operates as the primary command and control center for a massive orbital broadcast tower projecting something called the veil. The veil is defined as a localized electromagnetic suppressor field. It's described as a planetary frequency quarantine, specifically designed to keep human consciousness operating at a suppressed baseline state. The source texts actually outline the mechanics of this proposed Archonic grid in 4 chilling steps. Step 1, the lunar command node continuously bathes the Earth in extremely low frequency, or ELF, waves. Step 2, these artificial signals are deliberately designed to override the Earth's natural 7.83 Hz Schumann resonances. You know, the natural hum of the planet that biological life relies on for coherence. Step 3, this interfering frequency creates a psychological prison reality, literally locking humanity into states of fear, division, and stress. And finally, Step 4, the original builders, referred to in the text as archons, feed parasitically on the dense, low-frequency emotional energy generated by this traumatized population, a cosmic resource known as loosh.
We've looked at the Apollo acoustic anomalies, the precise mathematics of its mass, the titanium armor deflecting asteroids, and the Soviet hypothesis that ties it all together into a planetary frequency grid. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. The next time you look up at a full moon, are you looking at a natural, lifeless rock, or are you staring at the hollow, armored hull of an ancient machine? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning what you see in the sky.